TikTok sponsoring me wasn't this like crazy loophole thing. I thought the idea of NASCAR racing over in Europe so interesting. We were supposed to stop racing, and then I got the amazing opportunity with the NASCAR D4D program and Rev Racing.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pit Crew podcast. Today, we got a special guest. We got NASCAR driver Ryan Vargas coming on shortly. But hey, episode number 7, we're hyped up. I'm being joined by Chris from Drive Smart and Robert Hill. How you feeling, boys?
Honestly, it's good to be back. I feel like I was just saying to you guys before it started, I feel like I haven't seen you in a year. I know you were at Richmond last week, and then 2 weeks ago when you guys were with Tucker, I wasn't here. So super excited to be back and super happy to have Ryan. I know we've been trying to line this up for a while. And then Robert, how have you been?
I've been good, man. I'm excited to have you back with us. Excited to talk to Ryan tonight. He's got some really exciting stuff in the pipes here. So it'll be fun to have a chat with him and see what's going on in 2024.
Awesome. Well, I guess without further ado, DLB, we probably should bring in tonight's special guest, right? You want to bring in Ryan?
I think we should welcome NASCAR driver Ryan Vargas.
You've had an eventful year, and it only gets crazier. So how you doing, my friend?
Been working a lot. Been spending a lot of time at my desk, setting up meetings, doing phone calls. Been working on race cars a lot more. Thank goodness. It's been so boring sitting at a desk. I've been on fire a couple times, so it's been a fun time this year. But just enjoyed my time. Really just really excited about the year ahead.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I always tell the other drivers, I mean, honestly, you guys are not only just some of the best drivers in the entire world, but you're like traveling salespeople, right? So like there's a lot of desk work, a lot of travel work, a lot of racecraft that you have to do. So like I don't envy your schedule, for lack of better terms. So with all of these podcasts and these interviews, we always like to start in the same place. So Ryan, if you don't mind, tell us where you're from and give us a little bit of your background, your childhood, if you don't mind.
I'm originally from La Mirada, California, just outside of Los Angeles. My family does not have a racing background by any means. My dad's a construction worker. My mom's a first grade teacher. So very much from a location that doesn't scream racing and from a family that doesn't scream racing. But when I always liked cars. I always liked anything with four wheels and a motor. Was a big Monster Jam fan growing up as a kid. Loved, road racing, loved NASCAR, loved anything with four wheels and a motor. Anything that was a car, I loved it. And I remember going to my local short track at Irwindale Speedway, and I saw one of the recess aids from my elementary school at the time. And I'm like, well, you're not supposed to exist outside of, school. Why are you here? And sure enough, she said, oh, well, my son's racing. This is one of his last races. We plan on selling the car soon. And when I found out about that, it was immediately like, okay, time to look at my parents and say, hey, this might be something I want to do because you guys, I've tried every other sport and I stink at it. So let's try this. Ended up starting racing when I was about 10, 11 years old when I was 11 back in 2012. I just haven't looked back. Won several state championships in those cars. Moved up to street stocks. Tied for the national title in the Bandoleros. Street stocks. Won a bunch of races in that. Went to late models. Won a handful of races in that. Moved to Market East. Then did some. Then jumped up into the Xfinity series where I've kind of made my home for the most part. And a little bit of truck. And now we're going overseas to Europe.
That's incredible. So you're telling me that your racing career basically started because your lunch aide son was racing in California and they were ready to sell the car. So how do you convince your dad and your mom into buying a race car?
I tried every sport, right? I tried them all. I am so bored. I get so bored going to games and I went to an NFL game for the first time and I hate to say it, I was, oh my goodness. Brother, it was rough. I didn't even know what was happening. I was so tuned out. But, I found out that, every one of those sports does have one position that is the same, and it is bench. Again, that's how bad I was. I couldn't catch, couldn't throw, couldn't do anything. I love cars.
I was really good at baseball too, Ryan. I always played left out.
There you go.
Yeah, I get it. I was as much as I was driven to play baseball. I grew up in a baseball town. We won a World Series, Little League World Series twice here where we're from. And like it was like you had to play baseball. I played left out the entire time. I was left-handed, couldn't see anything, couldn't hit, couldn't catch. I could run a little bit, right? But no, I completely get it. So like at what point did you start becoming passionate about racing? Like when did you start watching it and you're like, I really love this?
Since I was probably like 4 or 5, like I said, waking up and watching Speed Channel, at 5, 6 a.m., starting my day and just not tuning away. I just like cars, man. It's all I wanted to do. It was funny, for a while there, I used to actually make fun of my dad for watching NASCAR because all they did was turn left. And now, here we are several, 15 years later. And yeah, that came around very quick.
Turning left, brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this, right? So like when you and your family bought that first car, right, at 11 or 12 years old, so a lot of drivers and people we've had on the show, like they come from racing backgrounds, right? Or their parents did it or had like a short stint. So like when you get that car, like how does the maintenance and all those things work? Like I'm sure you said your dad worked in construction, so he's good with his hands. Like did he dive straight into it or like how did that go?
We had the Barker family who was a big help for my dad, and my dad just geeked out with the Bandolero race car. He went from knowing not a single thing about a race car or anything about those cars to people call him to this day to set up their race cars. His setups have, I think, 3 national titles, like, well over 15 state titles, like 10 track records. Like he went, like it's insane. Those aren't all from me. I'm saying like from customers he's
Just in
had.
general.
Like, yeah, it's insane to see what he did, but he learned a lot, and it led to me winning. I think I won over like 60 something races in Bandoleros or something like that. Tied one of those state titles, tied for national title. Like that was like a huge thing for my progression.
Back in 2020, you got sponsored by TikTok, and that car went viral. How did that sponsorship come together? Because it was such a big deal when it happened.
Yeah, it was unique how that came together because obviously we're all locked inside, right? We all know what happened in 2020, and I remember my buddy Ryan Pistana put out a tweet, with a rendering of my car, which was the number 15 at the time, and it was it was like, imagine if TikTok sponsored Ryan Vargas, because at the time I was the only NASCAR driver on there. I had like, I think it was like 20 something thousand followers or something like that. Like it was a decent sized following, like a really good following. And it got retweeted, got shared. And, when people post, concept schemes like that, you don't think anything of it, right? It's like, oh, that's cool. Like that's awesome. Like, that's a cool hypothetical. That will never happen. And go on with your day, Well, a few weeks go by, and through, it just so happened to end up on the desks of some of the people at TikTok at their marketing, and they through word of mouth they got my contact info, and we set up some meetings, and this was the first major sponsor that I had ever pitched. Before that, I had like Hoseman, who was like a local, industrial hydraulic hose supplier out in the West Coast, right? So, you have this international global tech giant, and you're sitting in a meeting by yourself with their head of marketing, their head of global integrated marketing, their this lawyer or whatever, right? It's like, oh, I'm having to actually sell myself here. And I'm 19 years old, and I talk about learning marketing on the fly. But it was from those conversations that went from a one race deal conversation to 3 races to, hey, let's finish out the 2020 season. And it was a massive deal at the time because they put a lot they brought a lot to the table there, and it was a huge deal for me. And I was able to bring that to the team I was at the time, JD Motorsports, and they're a small group over there. And what made me really happy about it was the fact that we brought so many eyeballs to that team, and not only that, but we actually were able to get the resources we needed to go and be competitive. And we saw it at a lot of the races how fast we were. Talladega, we got caught up in a wreck and a stack up, but we were fast. We go to the Roval in the rain, finished somewhere in the mid top 20, right? Go to Kansas, had a power steering failure, but drove from last to 26th without power steering before we inevitably had to pull off the track. That took that same exact car, left the decals and everything on it, took it to Texas, finished 8th. And that's just how good we were at the time because of everything that went into that. So TikTok sponsoring me wasn't this like crazy loophole thing. It was legitimately because TikTok wanted to support. I think that was like probably one of the coolest things you could ever think of.
One, I respect the heck out of JD Motorsports. I respect the heck out of a lot of the smaller teams, right, that are not competing with the Joe Gibbs of the world, and they do a great job at Joe Gibbs, right? I respect the heck out of these small teams because they are putting their blood, sweat, and tears just to like make it to the track, right, and make payroll and do the things that they got to do to compete at the highest level. So I respect the heck out of these teams, right? And so that's more a statement. The question I'm going to ask you is, so you're 19 years old and you're sitting down with billionaires, right? Like at TikTok, it's not like a mom and pop shop and like the hydraulic company that sponsored you, like big respect to them, right? Because motorsports is not cheap from a sponsorship standpoint, but you go from like a local mom and pop shop, for lack of better terms, to like a TikTok. How quick at 19 years old did that like mature you? Does that make sense, the question?
I mean, I would say that was I wouldn't say that in itself matured me because it showed to me that I could do it. You know what I mean? Like it was more of a, a self-proving time for me, being able to jump in and try and sell myself like that. But I would say the real time where I, felt like it was me maturing was the timeline between 2018 and 2019. Because in 2018, I went from a full-time ARCA East ride to no ride to how do I stay in the sport. And I think that was a big time where I had to learn a lot about myself as an individual, but also I had to reevaluate my priorities, I guess you could say, because at that time I thought I was washed up and done, right? So I'm very fortunate to have made it to this point. And I say it all the time. I should have never made it past late models with the amount of, with the budget my family and I, worked with. Like, we were shutting down our program. At the end of 2017, we were supposed to stop racing. And then, I got the amazing opportunity with, the NASCAR D4D program and Rev Racing. We were able to go out there and make the most of that opportunity. Then I went from there to Xfinity, right? So, I look at every opportunity since those days as a year added onto my life.
Makes sense. And then I'm going to pass to Robert, and then I have some questions. We're going to take, after Robert's done asking his questions, I want to take it back a little bit. I want to go back a few years. But Robert, go ahead. I'm going to pass it to you, my friend.
Yeah, Ryan, a lot on the deck here for you this season. We'll get to that a little bit later, but going back to your early days of your career, obviously everyone that we've spoken to so far through this podcast has had a mentor of sorts that's been there for them in their early years of their career. Did you have somebody like that in your corner that really kind of guided you through the path of racing, and maybe what's something that they've taught you that's stuck with you throughout these years so far?
I would say in my early years, I had some fantastic people around me that, guided me through, like I mentioned, the Barker family, Ron and Kaylee. They were two people that kind of really helped us out when we straight up just knew nothing about race cars or racing or racecraft, anything. And Kaylee still races today, races modifieds on the West Coast. Then you have, but I would say one of the most I'm going to name two names here. The first one is Charles Price. He was my late model crew chief back in the day, and he had this no BS attitude all the time. He didn't give a crap what you said. It was what do you need to do to go faster, or how do we make you be brave enough to go and get that spot? Because, like, I'm here working for you, and he's such an experienced dude and has so much like accolades in terms of like in my opinion, like how much he's done as a as a crew guy, but also as a driver, and that was a big thing for me because he was able to tell me, hey, I made this change, this is what you should feel. And if I went out there and didn't feel it, he would say either good because I didn't make that change and try and trick me into thinking I feel something, or he would call me stupid. And,
okay.
So it was one of the two, but it was great because it was like the school of hard knocks, I guess you'd say, and it was me and him to this day, like if I could bring anybody, anywhere to go racing, it'd be him. But the other one I say also is Brian Barry. He was the competition director over at JD Motorsports while I was over there. Now he actually now works at DGM, and he's just someone that I've had in my corner a lot. He's been there for myself, as a race car driver. He's been there for Ryan Vargas, the race car driver. But he's also been there for Ryan Vargas, the person, and the Vargas family. And so he's just an outstanding human who does a lot for a lot of people around him.
And it's definitely good to have a group like that behind you, people supporting you every step of the way, people that have been through it as well. Like you said, they're all racers themselves. And I got to ask you before we get you back over there to Chris, I see 3F Racing on your shirt. Of course, you're going to go racing with them in the NASCAR Whelen Euro Series. How did that all come together? That's a group out of Germany. You're obviously very far from Germany. How did they get in contact with you, or the other way around, and kind of walk us through how all this came to be?
Yeah, it's actually a really funny situation. The August race at Atlanta 2022, these two kids come up to me, Paul and Frida, and they're like super excited to meet me. It turns out it's the children of Dennis Hertz, who's the owner of 3F Racing. And we get to talking, and obviously they have some really big plans, really big goals with what the 3F Racing's future and stuff. And we got to talking. We started to kind of find some common ground on like, hey, how can we kind of help 3F at least kind of get their foot in the door in some of these other areas to try and build that platform to kind of continue growing as a company. And we started off with the late model deal, trying to get drivers in through there, and we're still actively building that up. And then at the end of the year, I'd say midpoint of 2023 is when I officially signed on to try and help develop their development program and try and build that up as best I can when I have the ability to. But also, I remember having those conversations, and we were talking a lot about the Euro Series because we tested with a driver, Max Mason, who ran a Euro Series race or two. And my roommate, even Myatt Snyder, he ran the Euro Series for a year. I ran the Euro 2. I always had a lot of interest in it, right? Because I love NASCAR. NASCAR is my thing, right?
Yep.
I thought the idea of NASCAR racing over in Europe was so interesting to me, right? Like, I know, on paper it's not NASCAR Cup, NASCAR Xfinity, but it's still NASCAR, right? So, like, what is it all about? And we had a lot of conversations. I approached Critical Path Security, my main partner, and we were like, like screw it. Let's just try it. Let's go out there and see what this is like. And so we went to Ossersleben in Germany. Had a phenomenal time at that racetrack. Such a fun track. And wound up securing 2 top 10s on debut. Qualified top 10. Like, it was just, overall, I was so happy with how everything went. And so was the team. So was the sponsor. And that just led to us really developing what we have now and trying to go over there full time.
It's definitely a cool deal and something that we look forward to following along with. And I just want to ask real quick, you mentioned that obviously you love NASCAR, you love being involved in it, no matter where it is. Have you ever given some thought to maybe doing a race or two in the NASCAR Canada series or down there in Mexico?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to teams.
Trying
to get
see what we can do.
It all out. I want to do it. I've labeled this year my drive everything year because I want to drive everything. I don't want to just find myself to one thing, right? I've had a lot of people ask me before, like I went on this on Twitter, and I talked about like, why am I doing this? And really the answer is simple. It's just consistency. Like I've been doing this part-time Xfinity and truck stuff for the last 5 years, and it's been a blessing. Like, it means a lot that I've been able to build my reputation in the sport and be able to have opportunities to be here. But I looked at what I was doing, and it's like, okay, is another year of part-time racing going to move that needle forward the way I need it to? And the answer was no, because, I got that top 10 at Texas last year in the truck, had some really good runs, had a lot of good runs in the Xfinity car. But at the end of the day, I have that experience now. I'm not in the game of gaining experience there anymore. Now it's time to try and, build up a better platform there. And so I I looked at what we had and I said, why not? Let's just go run something consistent. Let's go run for a championship. Let's go run for podiums and top fives and potentially wins, while still being able to travel the world. I mean, I'm 23. I get to travel the world and race cars. I probably won't be able to do this ever again in my life.
And it's definitely a cool opportunity. I'm going to throw you back to Chris here now, and I know he's ready with some questions. He's locked and loaded right there behind the mic.
You know, the problem is like part of me wants to be super, super cool, right? And just ask questions like, Ryan, when did you figure out you love race cars? The other part of me wants to really talk about the real deal. And the problem is like at the end of the day, Ryan, if your dad was the CEO of Pepsi, you would have run every series there ever was with no questions. And, like, with all due respect, you wouldn't be on the show, right? Like, we're not Eric Estep yet, right? Like, we're not Michael Waltrip, right? Like,
Be
even
here.
though it took a while to get you here, right? But like at the end of the
I'd
day,
be
we
here.
like you wouldn't be here. So like the problem is with the sport is that the hardest working driver doesn't always get a ride because you have to have the sponsorship, right? So like how hard is that to balance? Because like I know we've had a conversation on the phone, not to get into the details, but like I know you're very much like Kyle. The reason we love Kyle is that he has a wrench in his hand 5 days out of the week, right? Or doing tests with Chevrolet, and he's working his butt off to get into that car, and that's why we fell in love with Kyle. And I know you're very much like him. Listen, if I had an unlimited bank account, right, and Mario was like, okay, you could have both drivers to pay
Today
for it,
working on the car.
exactly. Like if Mario was like, okay, get 91 and 92, like, and everybody in the office knows it's not a secret. Like you are my second favorite driver to Kyle, right? Like the sport is so crazy. So like, how do you balance all this out to like make this work to be able to keep getting into rides? Like, how hard is that on your mental?
It's excruciatingly hard. I mean, I've been very vocal online about my mental health, like over the last like 2 years. I would say about 18 months ago, I really changed everything that there is to change about my life, because I experienced burnout on an exponential level that I don't ever want to experience again. I was selling, working, and I was getting, I just didn't feel happy, at the time, right? And I think as a race car driver, or as a person in any industry, whether it's working at Drive Smart or being a mechanic or being a scientist, whatever it is, right? If you're not happy in your work, you can't perform at the level you need to perform, and I wasn't able to perform at the level that I needed to perform. And I took a step back in terms of I took a step back, and what I mean by that is I looked at what I was doing, and I said I am not happy, and I need to change this because I was such in a mental. And so I said, all right, let me lay out what I need to do. Let me build a program that actually works for myself, for the partners around me, but that is still consistent and is able to deliver on the goals that I want and the goals that my partners want. And sometimes that means, okay, you know what? Maybe I start pick and choosing races. Maybe I don't try and race every race under the sun. You know what I mean? It's okay that I'm not in the field this weekend, this race right here, right? As long as I'm able to build a platform to continue bringing on my partners, and build those programs effective instead of trying to go week to week, trying to do all this stuff. So it's a grind that is exponentially hard, especially when you're on your own. You know, I see a lot of people around who have multiple salespeople and multiple this, which is fantastic. And finally, long last, I have salespeople that work for me, and it's been an absolute blessing. But at the same time, I know what I need to do, and I was able to take that step back, run the races I wanted to run, and finished 8th in my second ever truck start, having never driven a truck before. Went to Europe, got 2 top 10s, having never driven a car over there before. I was happy. I remember calling my mom in Belgium for that race and telling her, I have my mojo back. It feels like I'm running back in the day again. And that was so, like, I was almost in tears with how happy I was.
At the end of the day, it has to be mentally taxing, right? Because like now you're willing to take the trip. You'll go to any country in the world to go race, right? Because you love it that much or that passionate. Now you're in Belgium. I can only imagine what time it was in Belgium versus what time it was in the US when you called your mom to like find that mojo again. And like you're realistically going back to Europe now, right? So like how'd you get into the European series again? Like how did that become part of the plan?
It just made the most sense. Like I said, my partners came to me, Critical Path. They said, Ryan, we really like the Euro Series. And, with the program that we were able to put together, and we looked at kind of what was out there, right? And it just made more sense to go full-time in Europe than, to do a part-time deal here in the States, right? We're able to go out there and put a year's worth of consistent marketing, consistent branding, consistent activation behind the scenes, and consistent B2B activation internally, that doing one-off races here and there in the States isn't going to allow us to do. We are able to build that consistency and build a program that actually delivers on the results that my partners want. And also, it gets me a year of full-time racing. It's just something that I haven't had. And I get to go, again, I'm 23 and I get to travel the world. I don't think I'll be able to do this when I'm older. I think I'll be able to travel the world. I hope I'm having a family and kids one day, right? You're not going to be able to do that with a family and kids, right? So it's like, this is now or never, right? And I've always wanted to race overseas. To me, this was just, it's a game of just consistency and happiness.
I mean, honestly, it's like a weird world you're in because you have to like make these sacrifices. And you're right, when you're like 35 years old and you have a kid, like going to Belgium and then going to France and then like going through all the Benelux is not that easy. But like, let's talk about this year, right? So you've had some opportunities in Xfinity. There's been some challenges, not at your fault, right? Because like sometimes the machine breaks down. There's nothing you can do about it. But how has been your take on Xfinity at this point so far this season?
Oh man, Xfinity is at its highest level I've seen it ever. I mean, you look back at Xfinity in 2014, 2015. I mean, it was the top 10 and then the rest of the field. There was the front of the pack. There was like the 12th to like 18th group, and then it was just everybody else. Now it's, hey, you need to show up with a full allotment of tires, a good motor, the right setup, and everything, or you're probably not going to be in the race. And I think that's so insane to look at. And, props to all the teams, all the groups that have, got into this and adapted with the times, and I've been able to grow, like you mentioned, JD Motorsports. I was with them in 2022 when I would say the transitional period was like towards the end of 2021, when we started seeing a lot more teams get into the Xfinity series. 2022 is when we started sending guys home, often. And it was so interesting, seeing what we had to do internally, right? To change what we had to change to be better when we showed up to the track. We couldn't do some of the things we used to do. You couldn't cut a corner here. You had to show up with your best bullet every week. There was never, oh, okay, well, we know this car isn't as good, so but we'll be fine. No, you had to show up good. And like, there was days where like, I remember Pocono 2022, I finished 25th, and it was like, holy cow, I just drove my off to go 25th. Like, that is nuts. So, I mean, it's crazy to see how the series is, and I'm very thankful for the opportunities I've had this year. With our collaboration and, being able to jump in with Mike this weekend. Hopefully we have ourselves a good weekend. They're putting a lot of work over the shop over there. So, just that's the beauty of the year that I'm having right now, is I have this full-time Euro thing, but it also allows me to now go and do those part-time deals on top of it, right? When I'm able to. And I'm very fortunate to, be in the situations that I'm in.
So here's my honest opinion on it, right? So we had a Cup foray a few years ago with Rick Ware Racing, and I think at this point, it's so expensive as a sponsor to get into the Cup that it is priced out a lot of companies that want to try to get that experience, right? Or try to build that. A lot of that money is starting to go towards the Xfinity series because it's more, the barrier of entry is not as expensive to get into Xfinity, even though it's really expensive. You know better than anybody. It's like not cheap to run a race car, right?
No.
But the barrier entry is
In the
not
racing
much.
world, it's
In the
cheap is
grand scheme of
relative.
things, it's like 1/5 of the amount, right? Like
Yeah,
for a good
cheap is
team and a good
relative.
car. So I think
Yeah.
that you're going to start seeing more of the companies that used to be in the Cup Series go to Xfinity, right? And then you get guys like SVG that are coming in, and you get, you know, your Cole Custards who are like, this guy's awesome, right? And you get the Austin Hills of the world, and then you get guys like you and Kyle, and you see Natalie, and you see these stories, right? I think the storyline is better in Xfinity because you have the underdog stories, you have the international drivers. I think the storyline is better, so you kind of start seeing that versus Cup, right? And that's why the competitive level is so high. But what my concern is, right, from a sponsor standpoint, is okay. So then eventually Xfinity becomes too expensive, and now you're into trucks, and eventually everybody gets priced out because not everybody's Pepsi, and not everybody is going to be helmets, right? So what are your thoughts on that? On how much it is to get into the sport from a sponsorship standpoint?
It's very difficult for somebody to get into the sport from a sponsor standpoint, and that is also why I've made the moves that I've made. It's because, and I'm sure Chris, you could probably attest to this too. When you're outside that top 15, TV time isn't easy to come by, right? So now, I'm trying to sell sponsorship, and it's like, oh, you might get on TV, if you're not with one of those big groups. So it's like, it's difficult. Like, it's really difficult. And so, I if there's one thing that I wish would happen more, I know they used to do like the through the field segments on races, right? Like, I wish they would do that throughout the field, like just like once or twice a race, right? Just say like, oh, here's the battle for 23rd. Oh, hey, wow, they're 3 wide for 29th. It's like, yeah, it's not for the win, but like, it's exciting racing. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. Like, people are so quick to say like a race is boring because they're only showing the leaders. It's like, watch what's happening like in the battle from like 15th on back. We're like 80 wide, trying not to kill each other here.
It's so funny because from a sponsorship,
Don't go 80 wide.
Yeah, from a sponsorship standpoint, when Kyle accidentally spun out JJ Healy, we're like, oh my God, we made it, right? So like in the field, you're like screwed, right? So I'm gonna pass it to Dustin, and then you pass it to Robert. I have to go off camera for like 10 seconds, all right?
All right, sounds good. So, Brian, I got 2 questions here. First one, in 2018, you became a part of NASCAR's Drive for Diversity program. I believe you were still in high school at this point. How do you feel that helped push your career to the next level?
I mean, at the like I mentioned earlier, at the end of 2017, I remember my parents sat me at the dinner table and said, we were going to stop racing. I was going to, they were going to sell the car, potentially. It was either sell the car and put that money to college or keep the car and run like a race a year or something like that, right? Just for fun. And I was okay with it because I had personally seen competitors of mine, refinance their homes, sell their personal things, their personal items to go racing. And I'm very fortunate for the opportunities I had, especially like I said back in the day, I had fantastic partner in Hoseman when I was, starting out, right? They helped me out a lot in my early days. And, at the same time, when you're racing at the local level, it's still family money. So, when my parents came to me and said, we can't do it, I understand, and I appreciate that my family taught me the value of a dollar in that sense, because when they, when they said we're done, I knew we were done. I'm not going to argue it. I don't want to argue it. I don't want to see my family end up like some of these other families do. And so in that same time frame, I'm submitting my application for the D4D program, and I get the call saying, hey, come try out. I go do the tryouts down in Daytona, New Smyrna Beach, and we were one of like the fastest guys. It was really consistent. It was a lot of what I knew racing out west, right? Like I applied a lot of the knowledge of racing like at Kern. And it was really interesting to see how it all came together. And after the combine, about a few weeks later, I get a call saying, congratulations, you made the team. And that was like, okay, checkbox there. Extra year on my life in racing. And, so I go through 2018, and I will sit here and say every day that that was a fantastic opportunity, but I was severely underprepared. In that sense, I mean, I just I wasn't used to those cars at that time, and I was 17 years old racing ARCA East, uh, which at the time had like I think it was like 12, 15 races or something like that, racing at like Dover, right? Like the biggest truck I'd ran was Irwindale, and now I'm going to Dover where you have to flat foot it around the place, and oh yeah, hope you don't die. It's like that's crazy, and so that was a big adjustment for me, and so we had some really good runs, but we also had some teething troubles. But you know, at the end of the day, it got me into the sport and allowed me to meet some incredible people who have been able to help propel my career into the future.
Absolutely. So you have a massive TikTok following. Do you feel that helps bring sponsorship and push your career forward in any sense? Because I would imagine you go to any company and you're like, hey, I got over 500,000 followers on a social media platform. How helpful do you believe that is coming from a NASCAR driver?
10,000% it helped. It's you know, I remember a few years ago, like I had a lot of people kind of coming to me saying, like, "Man, like, why are you doing so much on social media?" It's like because I have to. Like, uh, yeah, I say I have to, but I also enjoy it. I actually really enjoy using social media as a tool to, show off my partners. Like right here, right now, we are live on YouTube.com, and I'm wearing my partner's hat. That's big for them. Like they're happy about that. They're gonna be stoked about it. And like to me, that's like okay, that's a no brainer for me. That's like okay, yeah, cool. Uh, and so I always put an emphasis on social media, and I like to show who I am. I like to show my personality. I like to show how I think, and everything about me because I want people to know. I want people to know who they're cheering for out there. You know, okay, Ryan Vargas had a mechanical failure this day, or wow, Ryan Vargas is out 38th place. What happened? Like that sucks. Like that's not like him. You know what I mean? Or hey, Ryan's running 20th today. That's not like him. He's normally at, 20th, normally up in 20th, right? Oh, Ryan's not commonly in the top 20 because not commonly in the top 10 because he's running for, a lesser team, right? So it's like I'm able to tell this story so that people are able to understand why things are the way they are versus them just seeing a stat book.
Yeah, right. Obviously, you mentioned the use of technology to help amplify your person and your sponsors, your partners, to try to get them out there during the week when you're not on the racetrack. But how else are you utilizing technology to prepare for a race weekend? I know you're an iRacer. Do you use that a lot as a good training tool to get yourself out there and learn the tracks? And even looking ahead to the NASCAR Euro Series, I don't know how many of those tracks are on the iRacing simulator, but how are you prepping for that?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of sim laps, learning as much as I can about each and every racetrack, watching footage, you know, analyzing any data that I possibly can, going over notes, just trying to be a sponge, really. I mean, you're taking in so much new information that you never had before, right? So it's important to take it all in, make sure that you understand it, and I'm able to apply it to what you're having to do right when you get to the racetrack because nothing prepares you enough until you get there.
For sure, and obviously, from an outside perspective, we see you going to a track week to week, and you're prepping each week for the upcoming week. But how far ahead are you actually working in your career? Are you already looking ahead to next year, trying to piece together those partnerships, put something together with sponsors, teams, any opportunities that you can get out there?
Absolutely. I mean, you're always looking, 1, 2, 3 years into the future. I mean, for me, I'm thinking 5 years into the future, right? Uh, I started dropping some teasers on some projects that I'm working on right now as well, adjacent to the racing that I'm doing. It's just so important to me to have this longevity, right? And to me, you know, having this full-time season over in Europe is just allowing me to use the platform that I have. Like you mentioned, social media, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to race full time, right? How do I amplify that for my partners and make sure that everybody knows when I'm racing, what I'm doing, and have that consistency built into my posting schedule, making sure that people know what's going on. And I think that is so intriguing and so exciting about this year because it's not your typical NASCAR weekend. It's showing up back in Europe and going overseas and driving something that's not normal for me, right? And I'm trying to show that to my audience.
For sure. And obviously you're a very active person on social media, and like we said, you do utilize that to amplify your partnerships and all the partners that you have behind the scenes with you. Was that something that you were taught as you were coming up through the ranks, or you really kind of self-taught in how to utilize social media to build that platform and kind of carry yourself through?
No, it was definitely something my mom kind of put on me, like, hey, you need to make sure you do, what you can to kind of build yourself up and deliver as much as you can. But it was also a lot of self-taught. It was a lot of like, hey, like, I need to do this. If I don't talk about this partner enough, if I don't, share my thoughts online about, how my race is going, right? Or like how things happened, or like if I'm not transparent enough to the viewer or to my audience, it's not gonna make me stand out anymore. That's really the game I'm playing here. How
Of
do I
course.
stand out more to the guy next to me, right? Because for every Ryan Vargas, there's another 1,000 very talented, very capable race car drivers who want to do what I'm doing. And that's incredible, right? It's incredible that there's so many drivers out there, but what makes you as a driver, right? What makes you different than any of those people? And that's so important nowadays.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily get is obviously there's the competition on the racetrack, but even fiercer competition is off the track, trying to get those partnerships, get those opportunities. It's a pretty cutthroat world too. Obviously, as we've seen, people like to swoop in sometimes and take partners from other people. I'm sure you've had that happen to yourself as well. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But before I throw you back to Chris, you mentioned 5 years. What's your goals 5 years from now? Where do you see Ryan Vargas in the world of motorsports? Are you in NASCAR, Cup Series? Are you traveling the world still? What are you up to?
I hope that in 5 years, Ryan Vargas is making money driving race cars.
It's a good goal.
That is what I want. I don't care if it's a Xfinity car, a truck, a Cup car, a Euro car, a Pinty's car, a Mexico Series, a Brazil, a Formula car, a GT car, whatever it is. I want to drive race cars for a living, and that is my goal and my dream. And I'm very fortunate to the amazing people around me who have allowed me to continue this dream.
It's definitely refreshing to hear a driver that's open to being wherever the opportunity is, and I think you're definitely in for some success here in the near future. I'm going to toss you back over to Chris, and I know he's ready with some great questions here.
No, I mean, Ryan, honestly, I'm going to make a statement first. Like, I think you do a great job promoting your sponsorships and your partnerships. I think that sometimes, speaking from a sponsor, that sponsors have unrealistic expectations. I think that My Radar with Kyle the last couple of weeks, they did a great job, right? I think they got the most out of what they're doing. They pushed the content to the app. Like, they made the most out of their experience in racing. I think some sponsors think it's like, okay, I get on a car and then I just up my sales or up my business contacts. It doesn't really work that way. You have to be engaging. And when you deal with a driver like you or Kyle, somebody who's grinding it out, they're going to give you 110% of what they got to help build that brand because they want to keep that partnership going. So my question is going to be, if you were to speak to the next generation of race car drivers, right? And I know you're only 23, but to a 11 or 12-year-old young man or woman that wants to get into racing and they don't have $1 million or their parents aren't race car drivers or in the industry, like, what would be the advice you give them at this point?
Because there's going to be, for every one good day, there's 6 horrible ones. You're to get where you want to get. But that one good day is going to be the reason why you tolerate those 6 bad ones. That's the way I think about it. You know what I mean? Brad Perez, one of my best friends, put out a fantastic tweet today. He said race car driving is like 85% gathering the materials, 85% gathering materials, 10% preparing, and then 5% actually cooking. And that's how it is. You have to be ready as a race car driver to not drive race cars. That's it, like, if that makes sense. You have to be ready to do everything else other than drive the race car on top of driving said race car.
Your sport's so much different because, like, if let's say we're talking to you and you're the best point guard in all of college basketball, right? Like, you don't need to go through all of the branding, all that partnership and recognition. You just play really, really well for your university or school. And if you really overperform or achieve like you would in almost any other racing series, you're going to the league, right? So you don't have to worry about it. But you're in a sport where you have to be the best basketball player and you have to have Gatorade behind you. Otherwise, you don't get to go to the NBA. It's a crazy sport. So I think everything you just said there and what I know him as Brad, but Brad Perez, like, I think that tweet really resonates, right? Like, it's almost 85 to 95% selling yourself and putting yourself out there, and 5% of actually what you want to do. And it's a crazy sport you guys are in. It really is hyper competitive.
Yeah, it's competitive, but man, do I love it. And I've told myself time and time again, you know, the minute that love goes away, I stop. And I mentioned, 15, 18 months ago, I was this close to falling out of love with it. I was very close to being out of love with it. I very, very well was just ready to kind of just, you know what, I'm done. And I looked at what I was doing, I looked at what I was building, and I said, no, I'm doing a massive disservice to myself and the people that have supported me to do. If I were to up and quit, all those people who have invested in me, all the people that have supported me, all the people that have, given their time and effort and resources into allowing me to chase this dream, that is a slap in the face to them and myself if I were to stop. So you just have to just kind of keep pushing, and thankfully like I said, I made those big changes to myself, both personally and professionally. It's allowed me to be a better person and
Absolutely. So, racing in the NASCAR Euro Series, how is it preparing for tracks that you never seen before, never raced before, and you're going to them for the first time?
really just trying to learn as much as I can, absorb as much information as I can, running virtual laps all the time, running, going over footage, doing as much as I can, asking those around me. And thankfully, I've been able to make so many great friends over there to where they've been able to kind of open their doors to me a little bit and just say, hey, while you're still not winning races, we'll help you.
That's awesome because I feel like it'd be so tricky, walking into, being so young and getting to travel and see the world. And I feel like it'd be very overwhelming going to some of these countries. And then you hit a track that you've never been to. And it's like, all right, it's time to go to work. And you not having a road background and having to learn this and be as competitive as you are really goes to show how talented you are as a race car driver, not just an oval driver and not just a NASCAR driver. It really goes to show all of that. So moving forward in your career, how big do you feel like this is going to help you years down the road when car owners will approach you and they're like, hey, he can do it all. He can run on road. He can run on the oval. And, clearly he's very good at all of it.
I've always been confident on road courses, right? It's always been something that I've felt very confident in. I have, several top 20s in, Xfinity. I ran good there in the truck before I got KO'd on the final lap. Obviously I went to, Oschersleben in Belgium last year and was competitive, even in wet weather. So it's something that I always felt confident in, right? But, when you're kind of in the situation that, I've been in, out here, you kind of get looked over, right? For the GT guy that's coming in, or the former, the open wheel guy that's coming in, or whatever it may be. So now I go to Europe, spend a year over there dabbling into the road racing there. Now I come back and say, if I do have a good opportunity here to, right, that team owner may be a lot more likely to say yes to the deal that I'm bringing, or whatever program that I'm building, than if I were to not do that.
Absolutely. That's such a cool deal. So I'm going to pass it back over to Robert and see what Mr. Robert has to say here.
Yeah, Ryan. I'm looking at the schedule right now for the season coming up over there in Europe. Definitely some wild circuits that you're going to be visiting. Obviously, you're going to go to Spain, Italy, Brands Hatch. You're going to be racing an oval as well at Van Ray. You're going to head to Czech Republic, then Germany and Belgium. What's the one race you got circled on your calendar? I feel like it's probably that oval, but is there one that you're really looking forward to?
I mean, obviously the oval, but at the same time, I've never driven a Euro car in an oval, right?
Of
So,
course.
to the naked eye, it's like, oh, well, Ryan's gonna, do good there, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, I have higher expectations for that race, but if I were to sit here and say, oh yeah, I plan on going there and waxing them, it would just be
Yeah.
completely ignorant of me. But I definitely have Brands Hatch circled. That is a huge weekend there. They run the Indy circuit there, so it's a longer in terms of lap count race, which I love because it kind of gives you more opportunities to try and make the most of your race. And obviously it's Brands Hatch. It's a really cool circuit. So especially that turn one, that dive down the hill. So just really excited to get over there.
Yeah, it definitely is a cool circuit. It's only 1.2 miles in length, so really short, less than a minute lap times, which is kind of unique for a road course. So definitely exciting to see. And I know those races are going to be probably a little late for us over here in North America, but definitely going to be something to watch and see what you can do.
Before we wrap it up, give a shout out to your sponsors and let everyone else out there that's going to see this know where they can find you on your socials.
Yeah, absolutely. We're heading over to Europe soon. Full time over there with Critical Path Security. Running my Critical Path Security, number 30 Chevy Camaro for 3F Racing and the NASCAR Euro Series. So I hope a lot of you guys tune in for that. Please feel free to follow my socials. It's Ryan Vargas _23. And on Instagram, it's RTRV23. I have tried to change it, but they won't let me unless I want to get rid of my blue check. So it's short for Ryan the Rhino Vargas. And I've tried to change it so many times, and they just simply won't. It's the one social that doesn't match. But I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on just about everything. Feel free to follow along if you want. A lot of fun to see what I'm doing. I'm a race fan that also just happens to drive race cars, so you'll notice a lot of my posts are from a race fan perspective instead of just a race car driver. So I can kind of show that to the fans out there.
And I'm going to do the first shameless plug ever, right? So if there are sponsors out there that watch this video, get Ryan in the 92 car with Kyle, right? and if there aren't sponsors out there, there's only fans, right? Go buy more of my my product at your dealership or call us or go on our website. And let's get enough contracts out there so we get Ryan and Kyle running all year next year together with DTM. And let's go shock the world, right? Let's go be underdogs. Let's go beat David versus Goliath. Let's go get this thing. Ryan, I appreciate you more than you know, brother. We love you here at Drive Smart. And I think you're going to do great things in the future. Just keep grinding your butt off, my friend.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure talking to you guys as always. And best of luck to you guys in Martinsville. I'll see you guys down there, and we'll just go have some fun.
Looking forward to seeing what goes on down there in Martinsville this weekend. Going to be a heck of a time for you guys. I've got commentary of the World Racing League from Mid-Ohio all weekend long, so that's going to be exciting. And man, I can't wait to see you guys in a few months at Pocono. It's going to be one heck of a good time.
Few months, I'm headed to Martinsville first thing in the morning, and we're going to call it a night with the Pit Crew Podcast, episode number 7. We're tuning off. Hope everyone has a safe, nice weekend, and we'll catch you in the next one.